Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930, and now that the Battlefield 5 beta has come to a close, I thought I'd share my thoughts on the upcoming game, including what I liked and what I'd like to see change before the full release in November. Now, there's a lot of talk about Battlefield 5 and whether it's historically accurate, but today I want to focus on what I think really matters here, and that's the actual multiplayer gameplay experience. And Battlefield 5 seems to be on the right track in this department, with a ton of great changes that make the experience more enjoyable than Battlefield 1. Let's start by talking about the map design. The open beta featured two multiplayer levels, Narvik and Rotterdam. Narvik was the same map featured in the Battlefield 5 alpha, and my thoughts on this map are still the same as before. The map itself looks beautiful, with nice snow particle effects and interesting enough objective areas to make each engagement feel unique. The snow effects can occasionally build up as well, limiting your vision significantly, but it's generally very bright and clear out. But the lighting design and amount of environmental objects can make it incredibly difficult to identify enemies, especially in the town area, and it can be very overwhelming. I found that setting up fortified positions and holding strategic locations helped greatly, and working alongside a vocal team also helped to identify hidden enemies flanking along the hillside and the trees. Based on the several matches that I've played here, I found most of the action takes place around the town area, with some smaller engagements occurring between squads along the railroad bridge. All the objectives in this map seem to offer some intense action at some point throughout every match, and I very rarely witness any team getting a majority of the capture points. So overall, this is a very well balanced map, with a beautiful visual direction, but it can be difficult to keep track of enemies if you're not careful. Next we have the new map Rotterdam. Now this map is really cool, and I think I enjoyed this one the most. Not only does it look incredible even in the game's current beta state, but it also plays very nicely, with great objective variety and plenty of opportunities to plan new strategies if you find yourself getting killed too often. For example, if your squad keeps trying to attack a point like Delta only to find that the enemy has complete control of the surrounding alleys and streets, you can use the large elevated railroad to sneak across into the upstairs of some nearby buildings, and secure an easy entrance directly into Delta. All of the objectives again have great variety and are a lot of fun to fight in. A is often a complete mess, with enemies building huge sandbag fortifications around the flag, and enemy snipers controlling the upper train platforms. B is an even bigger mess, with a two-story reception hall with indestructible walls and a lot of sneaky squads firing from the waterfront. I think this location could benefit from some more destruction to prevent teams from holding fortified positions in the upstairs windows, because I felt I could never take out an enemy team unless I went into the building itself, which was more often than not a death trap. Charlie was an even more interesting objective, with a huge apartment courtyard with a ton of tall 4-story stairwells with windows to shoot from, and several alleys that could be blocked off with fortifications. I like this location, but I did encounter a game-breaking exploit, where players managed to find a way onto the rooftops, making it impossible to clear them out. This will need to be fixed, otherwise teams trying to secure this location will constantly have to worry about getting sniped from an unfair position. Rotterdam, just like Narvik, features some dynamic weather effects that can change throughout the match. Occasionally, the map will go from bright, clear and sunny to pouring rain within a few seconds, and this can be a bit jarring. But the actual rain effects look great, and like most video games, the actual sound mixing just isn't quite right. I'd like the rain to sound a lot louder, making it more difficult to hear enemies. This adds a new challenge to the experience and will force players to be more careful about their positioning. So far, I'm really liking the direction that they're taking with Battlefield 5's map design. They feel large, open-ended, infantry-focused, and offer a ton of unique objectives and areas that will be great for voice callouts when you play with a team. I never felt like vehicles were completely dominating the action like in past games, and fortified enemy positions could generally be countered with a different approach. So now let's talk about the actual gameplay experience, starting with basic movement and controls. Battlefield 5 doesn't really do much to change the movement over the past 4 Battlefield titles, but it does add in a few new features. When holding left or right and dropping to the prone position, you'll notice your character is sort of stuck at an angle. Now, I'm not really sure what kind of benefit you'd get from this, but it does look cool, and it feels like you're sort of diving out of the way of enemy gunfire at times. One thing I did notice though is that you can't drop shot nearly as effectively. Going prone forces you out of ADS, and it takes a few seconds before you can aim down your sight again. You can still hipfire your weapon, meaning players using SMGs could potentially still hipfire drop shot you, but it shouldn't be nearly as bad as in past games. You can also lay on your back if you go prone while moving backwards, which is a cool, albeit useless mechanic from what I can tell. Players can now pick up grenades off the ground and throw them back at the enemy, and even shoot grenades out of the air. This was extremely rare, and I never managed to throw back an enemy grenade myself, but I did see the prompt to throw it back at one point. I also tested shooting the explosives in midair, and can confirm that if you throw your own incendiary into the air and shoot it, it'll explode. But these mechanics feel incredibly situational, and while they're cool additions, they don't really do much to change the overall experience. You also can no longer aim down your sights while wading in the water. This will make it a lot more difficult to fight back if you get stuck in that awkward position where an enemy is shooting at you from the shoreline, but it does make a lot more sense now, as you probably could never aim your weapon effectively while treading water anyway. Aside from that, the movement controls should already be familiar if you've played Battlefield 1, or any other Battlefield in the past couple years. So now let's get into talking about different soldier classes. First we have the Assault class. The Assault class's role is generally anti-tank. They can equip Panzerfaust, which are disposable rocket launchers that can deal around 20 points of damage per direct hit. I did find the Panzerfaust to be incredibly weak though, requiring at least 4 to 5 direct hits on most enemy armor to blow them up. But this seems fair considering how many other players will likely be firing Panzerfaust at armor alongside you. The Assault class also gets a rifle-mounted grenade launcher, which doesn't seem all that effective from the time I've had with it. The primary weapons are a bit more interesting for Assault. The first weapon available by default is the STG-44, the Germans' premier assault rifle. This weapon is incredibly effective, with good stopping power, effective range, and surprisingly good accuracy, especially when tap firing. This weapon was much worse in the alpha build of the game, and has since received a bit more recoil and slightly reduced damage, but it still needs a bit more work, with single shots having either more drop-off or just less accuracy. Next we have the Gewehr 43. This weapon has some excellent stopping power and felt like a very well-balanced weapon. You're definitely going to want to invest in a medium-range scope with this one, and need to be careful when engaging in close range, as the reload time is much longer than any other assault weapon. One of my favorites was the M1A1 carbine, an American rifle that seems to be more effective at medium to close range. This weapon could use some improvements though, as it currently just doesn't deal enough damage. I found I needed to rapidly fire at close range 8 to 9 shots to down an enemy, which seems excessive for a semi-automatic rifle. And when firing the weapon, at least with an iron sight, it's difficult to keep your eye on the target, as the sights misalign during weapon kick more so than any other weapons in the game. The final weapon, and possibly one of the most underwhelming for Assault, is the Turner SMLE. Much like the classic M1 Garand, the SMLE fires semi-automatic rounds at a slower rate of fire than the M1A1, and just like the M1A1, it doesn't seem to deal enough damage. Currently, the STG-44 is a far more effective gun than the other 3 semi-automatic choices thanks to its high damage output, good accuracy, and effective range. The next class I want to talk about is the Medic class. Now this one has seen some big changes from the past games. Medic classes now always come equipped with a revive syringe and healing pouches to throw at friendlies, whereas before you needed to manually equip these items and could choose to go into battle without anything medic related. This is a great change as it now makes the medics more consistent, and you no longer run into those frustrating situations where your friend decided to equip a grenade launcher instead of a defib. On top of this, medics can also equip the large medical crate, which also behaves slightly different. Instead of healing crates healing within a small radius like before, players will need to manually grab medical supplies from the crate itself, which will trigger an animation where they pick up a little medical pouch, and the health will begin to regenerate. This also applies to the medic pouches, which can no longer be found lying all over the ground, but instead must be thrown directly to hurt teammates. This makes the game more challenging for medics as they now need to directly choose who they want to heal, rather than just throwing a bunch of medical stuff on the ground and ignoring teammates for the next 5 minutes. To counter this, players can now grab an extra medic pouch to use whenever they need to, instead of needing a medic following them around at all times. Revives are completely different than in the past, and I think the redesign is off to a good start. When a player's health drops to 0, they'll go into a down state, where they can hold the right click to stay alive or hold left click to give up. If a medic manages to get to you, all they have to do is press and hold E to revive almost immediately, rather than needing to fumble through their inventory for the revive tool and then stick it in your foot. The revive animation also locks the medic in, making him vulnerable, which is a much better design choice than previously where medics could just quickly revive everyone while crawling around on the ground. Medics are also no longer the only ones that can revive squad mates. If a member of your own squad is down, you can revive him no matter what class you're playing as. It may take longer for the animation to complete, and it is riskier, but this is a great feature that really encourages squads to stick close together to stay alive longer throughout matches. Because of this, I very often ran into groups of 3 or 4 enemies and found that multi-kills were more common than before. Now there are a few things I'd like to see fixed regarding both the medic class and the revive mechanic in general. First, the button used to stay alive or cancel your revive isn't very clear or consistent. When you press and hold left click, for example, the button prompt on the screen gets a bit larger to indicate that you're holding the button, but the rate at which the circle fills doesn't seem to change each time. I think it would be more clear if the button you're pressing would light up or change color, and they need to make the feature more consistent. Another thing that really didn't make any sense were the circumstances in which you were eligible for a revive. Sometimes I'd get shot by an enemy and I'd instantly die, with no way for friends to revive me, but other times I'd get shot in the head and I could still be revived. Another issue is the game-breaking revive bug, where if you're revived too quickly by a teammate after going down, you'll be stuck in a sort of limbo, not dead or alive. Your spawn screen will be stuck saying deploying in 9 and nothing changes. The only fix we found for this was to have each member of our squad die simultaneously, forcing a squad wipe notification to reset the stuck player. But this didn't work 100% of the time. This bug needs to be addressed before the full release for sure. Another more minor issue is the broken death animations, where players will just be floating in the air hanging by their belt strap whenever they die completely. It looks funny, but probably shouldn't be in the final game. The medic class has access to SMGs like the Sten and the MP40. These weapons felt incredibly effective, and while they are generally pretty weak, they were effective weapons when rushing objectives. Alright, moving on, we have our third character class, the Support. Support handles pretty much the same as he always does, with access to heavier light machine guns and the ability to resupply teammates. Just like the medic, Support comes standard with little ammo patches that can be directly thrown to teammates. Support can also equip an ammo crate, which functions identically to the medic's crate. Support is a much more important role than in the past though. In older battlefields, ammo was generally plentiful when you spawned in, with multiple magazines to use. Most players rarely ran out of ammo before they died, but in Battlefield 5, you can only spawn in with about 2 magazines, and are forced to seek out extra ammo right out of the gate. You can either get ammo from a support player, or resupply at special ammo depots spread out around the map. There's also health depots around the map as well that function the same way, allowing players to resupply without needing to rely on random online players or non-responsive squad mates. Supports can also choose to equip landmines to deal with tanks and come standard with repair equipment. Now this brings up another interesting new feature in Battlefield 5, fortifications. Players now have the opportunity to build fortified structures at key locations, like sandbag walls, barricaded windows, and sniping platforms. Any player, regardless of class, can build these fortifications, but support can build them much faster. These fortifications seemed pointless at first, but it was soon clear how much of a game changer a good set of fortifications can be. You can effectively close off flanking routes in some areas like the garage in Rotterdam with a set of barbed wire. Players can easily break barbed wire with hatchets, but only if they have one equipped. Sandbag walls can be used to block entrances to this courtyard area, requiring a player with explosives to breach them, often resulting in a deadly firefight at the entrance. And fortifying defensive positions in grand operations is imperative if the defending team wants to prevent paratroopers from capturing artillery guns. It's a fun mechanic that gives players a bit more freedom and seems to be a natural progression from Battlefield's focus on dynamic environments and destruction. Though I do feel things like barbed wire should get destroyed by explosives. Using the same tools, support players can also repair friendly vehicles, but this repair takes much longer than in past games, making it almost a pointless endeavor. The support class has access to several light machine guns, in addition to a double-barrel shotgun, but I didn't get a chance to try out the shotgun myself. The LMGs, however, are incredibly effective, especially the FG-42, with very little recoil to compensate for, standard bipods, and great damage output. And finally, we have the sniper class. Now, the sniper class will definitely need some tweaking. In their current state, snipers can easily one-shot headshot enemies across the map with little effort. I'm fine with the damage models currently, with 50% damage done for body shots and 100% damage for headshot, but the starting sniper features almost no bullet drop. At extreme distances, the drop-off is drastic, but in most situations, all you have to do is line up the crosshair directly on your enemy, and you should get an easy headshot. This, coupled with the new spotting mechanic, makes snipers as deadly as they were in Bad Company 2. The spotting redesign contributes the most to Battlefield 5's excellent feel. Instead of players running around spamming the spot key and a ton of notifications appearing above every enemy, players can now only ping a stationary position to give a rough approximation of an enemy's location. This removes the whole shooting at the spot icon design from the past several Battlefield games, and requires you to actually look for an enemy soldier for once. This doesn't mean the feature has been removed entirely though. Suppressed enemies get a smaller indicator above their head for a short time, which can be effective in directing teammates to fire at the same enemy to help out. And snipers can use their special spotting scope to bring back the old spotting icons for a short time. I very rarely saw friendly snipers using this feature, and I'm not sure if this extends to the full team or just your squad, but I can see it being incredibly useful later on once a majority of the player base understands how it works. And it could make it more difficult to hide in the trees. Snipers also have access to anti-personnel mines, or S-mines, which can be placed on the ground and used as a sort of tripwire alarm to keep snipers from getting stabbed. Snipers also get a spawn beacon again, though I didn't get much time to mess around with this. One other minor issue I noticed when playing on a foggy version of Rotterdam is that sniper scopes, and probably other scopes, can see straight through the fog, giving them a huge advantage, so this will likely need to be adjusted. Now let's talk about vehicles briefly. The vehicles handle much differently than in the past. Tank turrets can no longer spin around instantly with a mouse, but instead move at a fixed speed, requiring much more deliberate control and careful maneuvering. This gives enemy assault players a huge advantage when they try to rush in with dynamite to blow up the tank at close range, so tanks will need to keep their distance in most situations. This change alone made tanks a lot more fun to contend with than in the past, with infantry being given a more fair chance at taking them out. A competent tank driver can still deal some significant damage assuming they have a good position, but tanks, even the larger, more dangerous ones, are much more vulnerable in Battlefield 5. Airplanes have also seen some changes. For one, the turrets on the bomber plane are much easier to control, making plane-to-plane combat much more fun. It's still not perfect, as turning the plane at any point will make it nearly impossible for the gunner to effectively target chasing planes, but it's easier to aim and control than before. Planes also have more deadly payloads than before, with actual bombs rather than bunches of grenades or smaller shells. Bomber planes, for example, can drop huge payloads that can deal significant damage to structures, but they're slow enough that you can prepare for them. I think I'd like to be able to hear the bombs coming down more clearly, as there were times where I was killed instantly without even knowing a bomb was coming, but they don't feel nearly as overpowered as they were before. And I think that's also due in part to the new limited ammo design. Unlike Battlefield 1, where ammo was unlimited in tanks and planes, players now need to bring their vehicle to an ammo stockpile to resupply on heavy munitions like bombs or tank shells. This feature was previously part of the very old Battlefield games, and was a great mechanic that gave players more of an opportunity to fight without having to constantly worry about dealing with aircraft or tanks all the time, and I'm glad that they made this change. There's also a few smaller transport vehicles like half-tracks, rabbits, and you can even tow some heavy gun emplacements around in some cases. Next, we need to talk about another cool new feature, squad reinforcements. If a squad manages to earn enough collective team points, the squad leader can call in support. They can request a supply drop, which will parachute in ammo and health supplies. They can request a massive tank with several positions for teammates that can generally wreck the front line. And they can call in my favorite, the V1 rocket. This rocket is probably one of the coolest new features in Battlefield 5. If your squad manages to bank 41,000 some points, your squad leader can request a rocket on a specific position, which takes a few seconds to show up and then completely obliterates that location. The explosion is impressive and the sound can be heard all throughout the map. Players nearby will be knocked onto their backs, and it can be used to effectively capture a position that's heavily defended by the enemy. It doesn't seem to be as effective in Rotterdam, as most of the building interiors can't be destroyed and most objectives give players an opportunity to hide inside somewhere, but either way, it can have some devastating results. And now we need to talk about the biggest issue I have with the game so far, the game's customization menus. The current design for this is so ridiculously convoluted and obnoxious. First off, you can't unlock new weapons or attachments in-game, but are forced to leave your group and go to the main menu first. From here, you need to go to some armory screen, which feels like some weird online store page with some cosmetic loot crate style thing, in addition to special offers for attachments. Thankfully, this is all just in-game currency, but it also feels like it could have easily had real money attached to it at some point. From here, you need to go to a weapon screen, find the class you want to buy a weapon for, and then you need to go all the way back to a separate menu screen called Your Company. Here's where you can customize your character's appearance, which is not available in the beta, and the classes themselves. Now, there's a lot of features here that just aren't functioning correctly yet, like the attachment screen and upgrades, but even if they are working perfectly, it still makes zero sense. All of the weapon attachments are cosmetic now, aside from the scopes, which also still appear under the visual customization screen. If you want to improve your weapon stats, you now need to spend in-game currency on upgrades in a skill tree, with various perks like increased reload speed, better hipfire, and reduced recoil. Picking certain skills will lock you out of choosing other skills, requiring you to go back to the armory screen to buy a duplicate gun and start over. This is the most ludicrous customization system I've ever seen in a Battlefield game, and it just needs to go. I don't understand what is so difficult about going back to the way customization worked in Battlefield 3. You use a class, you get more weapons for that class, you use a weapon, you unlock more attachments for that weapon, with those attachments all offering benefits to the gun's handling. If they want to keep going with this pointless cosmetic stuff, that's fine, give us points for each round to spend on cosmetics. But the actual attachments and weapon performance shouldn't be made this complicated, and you absolutely should be able to customize your kit in-game without having to leave your group of friends mid-match. Another issue I have with these attachments are the scopes themselves. The longer range scopes are fine, though I would like them to look a bit more authentic, but the smaller reflex sights are so dark that they're not worth using over standard iron sights. And finally, let's briefly talk about the visuals. Battlefield 5 looks absolutely gorgeous, even in beta form, with high-res textures, insanely well-done lighting, and awesome special effects. Right now, the only thing that needs some attention is the game's underwater rendering, the motion blur effect, which looks terrible when flying a plane in third person, and maybe the performance. Now, performance wasn't actually that bad. I generally got around 80 FPS on my configuration with a 1080 Ti, but I wouldn't mind seeing it improved even more. There were also instances where the game would stutter or hitch for no reason, mostly in the map Narvik, so I'm hoping these issues can be ironed out by November 20th. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Battlefield 5. I've already seen a ton of videos crop up online saying how boring Battlefield is or how historically inaccurate it is, but the truth is, Battlefield 5 has a lot of great gameplay features going for it that make it a solid online shooter game. The gunplay feels far more refined, various features have been polished and make way more sense than before, like the Medic's Revive mechanic, and the new features like squad reinforcements and fortifications add a great new element to the experience to help this game stand out. This game plays nothing like Battlefield 1, and to assume it's a reskin would be a huge mistake. This game is worth keeping an eye on, at least for now, and I'm looking forward to trying more of it in November. But in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this overview of the Battlefield 5 Open Beta. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask below. Otherwise, what do you guys think of the beta? Are you more or less interested in picking up the game now? Let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.